Jeremy, good to see you, man. Welcome back to Pop Turner. It's been a while.
Yeah, dude, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's crazy. It's all storytelling, but we're a little change of pace here, right? We talked about Fear Street last time we were here. The horror movie kind of stuff, and now we're talking about Goodbye Hello. And I find it cool because right off the bat, you're so good in this movie. Congratulations! But you also produced this, right? So I kind of wanted to know what was that like, kind of instantly, just kind of wearing many hats on a project like this, and knowing indie film, like you really have to step up in a lot of ways, right? Like I feel like we all know that at this point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch because I know it's 97 minutes of your time, which is nothing to sneeze at. I really appreciate you taking the time and yeah, produced it, wrote it with my wife during the pandemic. Obviously, I played like the lead role in it, and it's a beat down making a sort of like lower budget film, as you know. I know you have several films under your belt at this point. But yeah, wearing multiple hats, it's like my capacity as an individual is pretty low. I'm like one track mind. I can do this task and then complete it, and then I will focus on this task. That's not the case with like low budget producing. It's you're doing everything. I mean, we had a few producers on this film. One of our producers was like on set with like a hammer and nails and a drill, like building fake walls because it's kind of what you have to do, my wife was also a writer and producer on it. She was, in the art department. She was like building the sets and like decorating the sets and putting up posters with like thumbtacks. And it's kind of what it takes. Yet looking back on it, I don't know, I wouldn't do it any different. And moving forward, I kind of want to do it that way as well. It's like everyone has so much skin in the game. I don't know, when people are working with like that kind of like passion and like capacity, you just love it so much more. And I think like it kind of hopefully shows in the final product.
I actually didn't know that your wife wrote this film. That's crazy. So now I'm gonna have to interview her. Like that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Good luck getting her on camera. She's horribly shy.
We'll do email interview. We'll do some questions because like the thing is like I want to. It's interesting because I want to kind of talk. This is the only kind of like plot character development question, Jeremy, I'm going to ask you a little bit. But like when I'm watching this film, right, like I feel like a lot of these characters, and I feel like from a writing perspective, her answer would be different than from an acting perspective. So I'm curious to see what your answer is going to be. But like a lot of these characters that we see come in and out of this film are like very lost, right? Trying to figure things out, self-reflection and everything, right? And I'm just wondering, like, from an acting perspective, is that more like fun or more challenging to play characters that are like lost and doing self-reflection? Because in a lot of ways, like, they don't know they're lost, right? It's like you're watching it as a viewer and it's like, we know they're lost. They have no idea. They're just going day by day, right? So I'm just curious from an acting perspective, if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start from like the writer's perspective because we wrote this right at the beginning of like the COVID lockdown, like March 2020. Didn't know how much free time we had. Everyone was told like world's gonna be shut down for 2 weeks. We're like, oh, dude, 2 weeks. Let's write something. And we wanted to write something like real and honest. And the original intent was to like write something that we could shoot for like $50,000, just like for free, like on budget, shoestring budget. And but yeah, we knew that if we're gonna do something that low budget, it had to be something like from the heart and like honest and like that meant something. So the first thing I latched onto was like, I have a sort of complicated relationship with my dad. And I look around and all of my friends, especially those who are like creatives, have like similar, like there's just like this generational gap. Like our dads are like sort of like a little bit more like intense, not in touch with their emotions because they weren't allowed to be. And there's just like this huge divide between like me and my friends and like our dads. So I wrote it as like honest and specific as possible. But as you're writing, you think you know what you're writing. You think you know your perspective. And then as you write, you're like, oh, actually, I'm trying to write a lost character, but I think I am actually maybe still lost in this process. Like, I don't know, my 20s, like it was just all about like figuring out what my relationship is with my dad. And I thought I had it when we were writing it. But even when we were done writing it, I'm like, dude, there's still so much I need to figure out on set as an actor. Like I wrote it on paper. I'm like, dude, I'm still so I'm in the mud with this still, So from an actor's perspective, it's kind of fun to like write it and you think you know what you're doing. And then you get on set and you're like, oh, there's actually like 3 or 4 different ways I can play this. And so much of it is just playing with like your castmates. I'm gonna see what they bring to the table. And at the end of the day, when they call cut, you're like, oh wow, I actually think I resolved something today on set that I didn't even know about when we were writing it, you know?
100%. Well, it's to kind of add to what you're saying. I think you're talking about two things. It's that script to screen journey, right? Where you write this thing and then you see it kind of come to life on screen. But it's also like, what is it? The movie you write, the movie you shoot, and the movie you edit, right?
Yeah.
And if
totally.
two of those are similar, that's pretty cool, right? But in a lot of cases, you know, it depends on what's done like in post when you're shooting and production and like it's so crazy. Sometimes you never know, right? In a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, and even like on set, the director, his name's Jack Cooper Stips, a really killer director that we hired out of the UK. He'd be okay, this scene, you know, like this line, that's what this means, blah 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 blah. And in the back of my head, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that's not what I meant. But I think he actually figured it out before I did. Like that feels right. I think he has a better grasp on the character that I wrote as like an outsider's perspective. So many things were happening on the day. I'm like, oh shit, that makes sense to me. And then even in the edit, our editor has a different perspective. And he's like, oh, here's what I think this scene is trying to say. And I'm like, yeah, dude, like I didn't do that on purpose, but that's good. Let's go with that. That's the beauty of like hiring people that are good, that you trust. They know more than you most of the time.
100%. And you know, so much happens before you go to camera on this project. You kind of like talked about that a lot, all your answers, because it's like, it's indie film, right? You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it, but like like you could see it as like two journeys, right? Before filming it and after filming it from a storytelling acting perspective, or do you see it as one big journey with multiple steps? I'm curious about that.
That's a good question. It was such a long process. Like we started writing it in 2020. We raised the money for it like right at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. Shot it for like 5 weeks at the end of 2021. All of 2022 editing. But looking back on it now, it's 2024. It's about to come out on August 13th. It's been 4 years of like pre-production, production.
It was a pandemic film process-wise. If you think about it, it was like all through the pandemic, like right, like 2020, right?
Totally, yeah. I mean, there were several times where like we thought it was going to get shut down. There were several times we didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was a journey, like writing it, raising the money. You know, we were 28 years old, and all of a sudden we had like this real budget for a feature film. Mm-hmm. And but dude, like we felt like kids that were just given like the keys to the castle. We were on cloud nine. We were so fired up. We hired other producers. We hired our director and our cinematographer and our editor. We cast it. And then as soon as like you start the pre-production process, you start to see how quickly the money goes. So we went from feeling like we had so much money to make this project to being like, oh crap, we're actually like running out of money so quickly. Because it's so, as you know, it's so expensive to make a film, you know? Just being on this side of it now, it's like you said earlier. It's like there were 3 versions. There was like the script version, and like we had a very specific idea of what it was going to be. And it totally changed when you like hire certain actors, you hire your director and your cinematographer, and then even in editing, you insert music and you go, oh, okay, I thought this was a drama, then I thought it was a comedy, and then now at the end of it, it's like it's a little bit of both. Which
it's a
is kind of like
genre-bending movie. There's no doubt about that. But that's interesting you say that in post, you kind of saw that come to fruition a little bit more, right? When you add music.
Yeah. Well, even in the writing process, like there was a version of the script that was like pure comedy. And then there was like draft 11, which was like pure like indie drama. And then, we had really smart producers and executive producers involved. And they're like, it needs to be a little bit of both. And we were doing rewrites all the way up until the last minute. And we finally landed on that sort of like more slice of life dramedy, which is like, it's just life, where it's like life is dramatic and life is comedic. And we landed at the perfect middle ground, I think.
100%. I'm just curious from a storyteller perspective, like obviously you're like, my question's more about like your acting, but like how separate are past projects compared like versus new projects like this? Like, do you bring things from Fear Street mindset wise, preparation wise, idea wise to something like this, or are they all separate completely after you wrap them? I'm curious about that.
No, it's actually the perfect question, because I learned so much on Fear Street. It was like my first like studio project being on those movies. And I went into Fear Street as prepared as possible. But when you get there, there's 300 people on set, and everyone like in your friend group and like your family, they're in your ear being like, oh, this is a big opportunity for you. You got to like make connections on the set, because you never know who you're going to meet. They're going to bring you on to the next project. So I went into the Fear Street movies like, oh, like I've got to network. I've got to be on my game. I've got to be on. I've got to be charming. And the first couple weeks of like Fear Street, I felt like a lost soul because I wasn't focusing on like the craft of acting. I was like there, like putting so much pressure on myself to like schmooze and to like get to know people and to like build connections with the director or like producers or like my castmates. And after a couple weeks, I was like, dude, they didn't hire you to come here and schmooze and make friends. They hired you to do a job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In the moment, I was like, dude, okay, forget all of that. Don't worry about networking. The best thing you could do is show up, be nice. You don't have to be like an ass or anything, but you like show up and act and do your best job as an actor. That's why they hired you. That's why they're giving you a paycheck. So being on this side of Fear Street, that has been my MO. Like I'm never going to show up on set and be a jerk and ignore people and like just stay focused. I'll walk on the set and be polite and say hi to all the cast and crew. But at the end of the day, you're just there to do your job, you know? So I came on to the Goodbye Hello set with so much more confidence and like ease inside of my body. And it really helped my performance actually. And at the end of the day, that's why people are going to hire you again. So I learned a ton on Fear Street.
The Fear Street movies are really special in regards, in my opinion, to like the history of like horror films. And I'll tell you why, because I find it really fascinating because there was that big kind of like the horror movies have always been around, right? And they're getting better and better, like, you know, story wise and like creation wise, it's my favorite genre. And like, there was that kind of boom with like the Conjuring movies and Insidious and everything, the James Wan movies, right? And then there was popularity and everything, and it continued. And then there's like these spikes, right? That just come out of nowhere where a couple of titles come out and people just seem to really gravitate towards them and they blow up. And like Fear Street was like one of those titles, right? Where like it dropped on Netflix, the films, and like it just took off and it didn't stop for like a year or two. You know what I mean? And then there was like the Black Phone and Megan and everything. So I wanted to know, like, what is that like being part of a genre at those like spiking times? You know what I mean? Like it's always been around, but like I'm just curious about that for you. Like, is it like overwhelming? Do you not think about it? Like it's crazy, right?
Yeah, it is crazy. And it's one of those things like in the moment, I knew they were like Netflix films and I was like, oh, cool. These are like really exciting to be a part of. But again, it was all about show up. And at a certain point, I'm like, I got to just do my best. Don't worry about what this is going to do for my career. Don't worry about if these movies are going to be successful, if people are going to like them. And then, as you know, like in Hollywood, you make something and it doesn't come out for a year, or in Goodbye Hello's case, dude, like 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So you really like kind of like forget about it and you move on. And in the case of the Fear Street movies, I liked them. I like from what I had seen, like just in like the post-production and like doing ADR and the little like clips I'd seen. I'm like, well, these are fun movies, you know, like I think at the end of the day, I'm going to like them, but I have no gauge on like what's going to be successful. So when something pops off like Fear Street, especially thanks to like social media and Instagram and just the way movies are sort of like reviewed and like critiqued nowadays.
Yeah.
It was overwhelming. Like all of a sudden you're just like thrown into like, you know, all these like press rooms and like doing interviews with Pop Turdiv and stuff like that. And it's sort of like, oh dude, like I made this like a year ago and now I'm talking about it. And I feel like I've grown so much as an artist in the last year. It's funny to talk about something I did a year ago.
That interview was such a long time ago, but at the end of the day, it also feels like I talked to you yesterday, if you think about it. Like,
well, yeah, that's because you're such a nice guy, dude. It's so easy to pick up with you.
Because that was like a while ago. Like the pandemic is like 4 years ago now, if you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, Fear Street came out like 3 years ago, almost exactly.
And there's like a new one coming. Is it like, because I feel like this is definitely, if you do any interviews, like a question that people are always going to ask you. So I feel like I just have to ask at this point.
Right.
But it's like, I don't know. It's like there's a Fear Street universe coming out, right? There's the new problem, like there's new films coming out and everything. You know what I mean? And like there's multiverses and everything. And we've seen like people that were in like a film come back to another film or a spinoff and like play another character or anything. Like, do you think about that? Like maybe like Jeremy Ford ever returning to the Fear Street universe? Like, is that something you ever think about? Or is that kind of one of those, like if it happens, great type things?
Yeah, I don't think about it. It's probably like a self-preservation thing. Like if my phone rings, great. The Fear Street movies were like so great to me. That whole team involved, love them. I would do anything for them. If my phone rings, dude, I would drop whatever I'm doing and I'd be a part of them. But also, I think it's in their best interest to do something totally new and fresh and not try to recapture lightning in a bottle. Like I think whatever they do next, I have a good faith that it's going to be rad and totally different. And I'm stoked either way.
Yeah, it's amazing. No, it's awesome. But I can't wait for, people to check out your film, man. Goodbye, Hello. I know it was like you put so much into it. That's what excites me because you sent me a screener and I watch it. And I think I like films more when I find out how much work was put into them. And how many conversations were had with like the directors and writers and producers to get certain shots we see. You know what I mean? Like you say, oh, I love that scene. And then you know that there's like 25 conversations that like happened or occurred to get that scene up. You know what I mean? Like that's what I feel like excites me more about the craft, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's so much like lore and like history with like making Goodbye Hello. I mean, obviously we have Steve Guttenberg playing my dad, and out of the gate when it came to like casting the character of Gene, we didn't want to cast like someone who's just like on the nose, because the Gene character, he's like grumpy, he's intense, he's a little aggro. It'd be so easy to cast just like an on the nose sort of intense actor. We wanted to do something a little bit more like unexpected. And when it came, we hired a casting director. She said, "Oh, what about Steve Guttenberg?" And all of us were like, "What?" Because Steve Guttenberg is 1980s comedy legend. But very quickly you're like, "Oh, dude, that would be so sick to see Steve Guttenberg play this like grumpy, like salty, curmudgeonly, kind of like abusive character." Like that's exactly what we wanted. And
it was one of those things you sent him and his team the script. He read it and he liked it. Basically, was it one of those?
Yeah. It was a total like long shot. I was like, "Oh, there's a good chance he's not going to want to do it, because why would he want to work with like this little film?" But he was experiencing something with his father at the time. His father was like sick, and Steve was like taking care of his dad, so there was like an element that he like really connected to. And I think Steve wanted the challenge of like doing something a little bit like off brand for him. And
100%.
we were told from his team that he was going to be in character from like the moment he walked in. Like he wanted to be really method about it. And I was like excited by that, because I try to take my shit at just as seriously. But day one, when we had Steve, I showed up to set and I was like a giddy little like schoolboy. I was like, "Oh my God, we've got Steve Guttenberg. It's going to be so cool. I'm so excited." I walk on a set and I'm like ready to give him like a big like bear hug. Like, "Oh, let's do this, buddy." And I was just so excited. I kind of forgot that he was going to be method about it. And I walked on the set.
Did he be like, was he like, no? Or like something?
Yeah, dude, I walk up and I'm like about to like hug him and like welcome him to the set. And immediately he's like, "What's with that haircut? Like, what's with that stupid haircut? Why are you dressing like this? Like, you're dressing like a girl, And I'm like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh shit, I forgot." He's like, "I need to be in character." And very quickly I was like, yeah, okay, cool. But he was in character from the moment he got there to the moment we wrapped. And the moment we wrapped, he was Mr. like congenial, so funny, telling us all these great stories from like the 80s and 90s. It was a trip, dude. Like it was such a magical experience.
Yeah. Both of you have been on Popternative, which is crazy.
Yeah, dude. Shout out to Popternative.
Absolutely. Jeremy, it was so great catching up with you, man. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for having me. August 13th, Goodbye Hello will be in the United States on iTunes, Amazon, everywhere you can order films.
Awesome. Jeremy Ford on Instagram, if they want to keep update with everything.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Till next time, this is Jeremy Ford and Petey Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.